The word separation hovered in the air between us, flickering in angry red as if the station itself were embarrassed to display it. Commander Vriek, newly installed head of administration, and proud owner of far too many medals, tilted his narrow head. His mandibles clacked in a pattern that might have meant sympathy on Kasari worlds. But to me it sounded like someone testing a broken metronome. One antenna tracked my eyes. The other kept twitching toward the white android waiting by the wall, still as a showroom mannequin. The station is adapting to an updated operational doctrine, Mr. Pritchard, Vriek said. His translator rendered clicks and trills into a polished accent that didn't belong in any species' mouth. We have secured a candidate who will modernize cargo coordination at a significantly reduced cost. Approximately 40% of your current compensation. Efficiency, you understand. I stared at the floating letters until they blurred. My name is Duncan Pritchard. I'm 51 years old. I've spent 11 years making Havayana stations. Cargo lanes hum like a well-tuned engine, quiet when things are right, screaming only when disaster is near. And I know the difference between efficiency and wishful thinking. 11 years, I said. No edge, no pleading, just the fact. Vriek's glossy, dark eyes remained unreadable. The station thanks you for your service. I'd expected anger to strike first, something hot and immediate. Instead, I felt a strange hollowness, like someone had opened an airlock inside my chest and let the pressure equalize. I looked down at the cardboard box I'd brought on the assumption that the day might go badly. It held a few objects that felt heavier than their weight. A chipped mug printed with Havayana cargo. Keep it moving. A small holoframe looping Margaret. And Penny's graduation on Mars. A worn jacket for when the climate system decided humans should be stored like meat. Your access codes will be transferred by 1700 hours, Vriek continued. TSSL will escort you to personnel processing. The android stepped forward with a fluid glide. Someone had tagged her model line with an unreadable designation, but everyone called her Tesla because it was easier than sounding like you were requesting an item off a menu. I didn't leave the commander the satisfaction of seeing my face crack. Who's replacing me? A promising graduate from the Kasari Institute of Logistical Sciences, he said. Top performance in simulation environments. Has she ever run a live dock with 12 inbound freighters and a mining hauler dumping late into an already saturated queue? One antenna twitched annoyance. Maybe. The systems largely manage themselves now. Your position has become ceremonial. For a moment I imagined reaching across his polished desk, grabbing those bony shoulders, and shaking him until his expensive confidence rattled loose. Instead I nodded because arguing with someone who'd already filed you under obsolete is like shouting instructions at a wall. You might feel better, but nothing changes. Fine, I said. Vriek blinked, as if my compliance had stolen a prepared speech from his mouth. Tesla turned with impeccable patience. I followed her out without looking back at the viewport. Because if I watched the cargo ballet outside ships threading toward berths, along vectors I designed, I might do something stupid. The corridors were all white panels and blue accent strips, engineered for cleanliness and comm. I'd walked them thousands of times. Today they felt like someone else's memory. Tesla's voice came in beside me, gentle by design. Mr. Pritchard, I am permitted to state that your departure was not unanimously supported. Who wanted me to stay? I am not authorized to disclose voting records. However, multiple department heads expressed concerns regarding transition risk. Let me guess. Vreek overruled them. Commander Vreek holds final authority over personnel decisions within his jurisdiction. That's a very polite way of saying yes. Personnel processing was a small office staffed by tombs. A Bellerin clerk whose species looked like they'd evolved from armored mammals, and then decided bureaucracy was safer than predators. His patterned shell plates shifted as his eyes found my box. "Duncan," he said, and then his voice dropped. "No, no, no. House cleaning," I said. "But your performance metrics are exceptional. 0 major incidents in 3 years. Supplier satisfaction is absurdly high. That's apparently the issue," I said. "If it runs smoothly, they think it's easy." Tesla stepped forward with the crispness of policy. "Revoke Mr. Pritchard's credentials. Prepare final compensation. Standard termination procedures." Toon's claws tapped at his terminal, with the reluctance of someone forced to staple a friend's future to a form. "Departure shuttle leaves at 2000. I can reserve a cabin." "Thanks," I said, though gratitude tasted sour. When Tesla left, Toons looked up, his small eyes oddly human in their sympathy. "For what it's worth, this is profoundly stupid." "I know," I said. 45 minutes later, I stood in our quarters, staring at open bags like they were traps. Margaret sat on the bed, hands folded, calm in the way people get when they're holding back a storm. "He really said you were too expensive?" she asked. "He said someone can do it for 40% of my salary." Margaret's laugh was brief and humorless. She'd made our hydroponics bay go from a failing project to the station's pride, turning bland ration paste into actual vegetables. If Vreek was truly as obsessed with budgets as he seemed, her name would be next on his list. "What about Kellerman?" she asked. "That medical contract. You've managed it for years." 7. I said, "And I'm not sure anyone else even knows the temperature sequencing requirements." She got up and wrapped her arms around me. I felt the weight of our life here, penny grown and gone, our routines etched into this space. The quiet satisfaction of being useful. "What do we do?" she whispered. "We do what we always do," I said, though my voice didn't quite believe it. "We figure it out." At 1847 my comm buzzed. The caller ID made my stomach tighten. Commodore Helena Whitworth, Fleet Command Logistics Division. Helena and I went back 15 years, to when she'd been a junior officer and I'd been a dock worker with a talent for spotting broken systems. I'd caught a data corruption issue in her manifests, saved Fleet millions, and that tiny fix had somehow set my whole career in motion. I accepted. Helena's face appeared, sharp and composed, steel gray hair cropped close. She looked like a person who drank responsibility the way others drank coffee. "Tell me I'm reading the personnel update wrong," she said. "If it says Vreek terminated me this afternoon, Then you're reading it right. That can't happen. Your name is embedded in half the sector's shipping protocols. You're scheduled to present the quarterly analysis to the council next week. I'm scheduled to be on a shuttle at 2000, I said. Inner colonies. No assignment. Just leaving. Her expression cooled. Stay. It's not your problem, Helena. It's very much my problem, she said, and her voice turned into an order you could build a wall with. Do not board that shuttle. I'm making calls. The connection. Cut. Margaret stared at me. That sounded serious. It sounded like Helena, I said, which was the same thing. We didn't unpack. We didn't leave. We hovered in the ugly in-between. Margaret ordered dinner from a synthesizer and it arrived tasting like an algorithm's approximation of comfort. We ate anyway, because the body still has needs even when the mind is coming apart. At 20:03 my comm buzzed again. Commander Vreek. I answered. He looked different. Both antennae were pointed directly forward, rigid with focus or fear. His facial tendrils quivered in a frantic rhythm. Mr. Pritchard, he said, and the translator couldn't hide the strain. There appears to have been a procedural oversight. Fleet Command informs me that your position requires sector-level authorization for termination. This was not made clear in my briefing. I waited. I require you to return to your duties immediately. The termination is suspended pending review. His mandibles clicked faster. There are 17 cargo disputes awaiting resolution. The Kalaman contract requires certification oversight, the council analysis. You called my job ceremonial. I said quietly. Poor phrasing. You said the system runs itself. I was misinformed about the complexity. And the replacement. His antenna dipped. Trainee Malisk has chosen to pursue other opportunities. What happened? Hazardous classification incident. Incorrect adjacency storage created a contamination risk. Automated systems initiated emergency protocols. I closed my eyes. Feroilicate extraction compounds. He stilled. Yes, they react with coolant residue if stored near refrigerated bays. I said, it's in the manual. The trainee was unaware of the manual. Vreek admitted, the manual I wrote. I said, a long pause. His tendrils slowed, hanging heavy. Defeat or nausea. Will you return? He asked. Margaret leaned into the frame of my vision. Eyebrow raised. Make it count. I'll think about it, I said, and disconnected. Seconds later, Helena called back. I assume he's just asked you to return, she said. He did. The council received an emergency alert about potential contamination on Havayana, she said. He had to explain why his optimization nearly triggered an evacuation. 3 contracts violated in 12 hours. Kellerman contacted us. Directly, I sank onto the bed. 7 years, I said. That relationship took 7 years. I know, Helena said. That's why I'm pushing to reclassify your role. Future personnel changes require fleet logistics approval. But what happens next depends on you. What would you do? I would make him crawl, she said, and the corner of her mouth twitched. But I'm petty. When the call ended, Margaret sat beside me and took my hand. It should feel satisfying, she said. It does, I admitted. And it doesn't. I'm mostly just exhausted. Then rest, she said. Let the consequences do their work. So I did. For 6 days I stayed on the station in a strange limbo, credentials restored. Technically employed, but refusing to touch the console until Vreek acknowledged what he'd done and put protections in writing. Meanwhile, Havayana started to unravel. On day 2, the mining consortium fiasco became a full-blown dispute. They had to offload reactive material into an external pod because nobody on duty trusted the internal storage procedures anymore. The consortium filed complaints about delays. On day 3, 2 automated cargo drones collided because someone had assigned overlapping transit paths through the same corridor at peak cycle. The drones survived. Their cargo didn't. Specialty agricultural seed canisters burst, and maintenance spent 14 hours vacuuming kernels out of vents and joints. On day 4, the Belarusian delegation arrived quarterly visitors with strict cultural cargo requirements. Someone parked their moisture-sensitive ceremonial crates next to a venting coolant outflow. Within 6 hours, mold bloomed across artifacts that were supposed to remain pristine. The delegation threatened to pull trade privileges and file a diplomatic grievance. Toons called me, voice tight with giddy horror. They can't find your cultural liaison protocols, he said. They're looking in the wrong index. They keep searching under Belarusian instead of moisture-sensitive species. It's labeled by sensitivity rating, I said. They don't understand that, he said, as if describing a child who'd been handed a book upside down. By day 5, messages poured in from every direction. Department heads, suppliers, captains. When would I be back? Could I please look at this manifest? Could I resolve this dispute? Vreek called 7 times. I ignored everyone. On the morning of day 6, I received a transmission from an unexpected source. Trainee Malisk. Curiosity. Beat caution, I answered. Her face appeared young for her species, tendrils shorter. Posture careful as if she were bracing for impact. The formality of her translator made her sound like she was reciting from a script. But her eyes weren't scripted at all. Mr. Pritchard, she said, I apologize for contacting you without authorization. I wished to speak before I depart. I heard you found other opportunities, I said. That is the diplomatic phrasing, she replied. And the honesty startled me. I resigned. I was unprepared. Remaining would have caused further harm. I hadn't expected humility from the person hired to replace me. That's unusually self-aware. I graduated top of my cohort, she said. I believed high marks meant competence. I was wrong. Her antenna lowered. In 3 days, I made more mistakes than in 3 years of simulation training. Real cargo doesn't behave like simulation cargo, I said. Yes, she whispered. Real beings do not behave like optimal decision trees. Real problems do not arrive with attached solutions. She hesitated, tendrils twitching. Your manual, the hazardous materials procedures. The cultural protocols, I accessed portions before my credentials were revoked. It was remarkable. How long did it take you to compile? 11 years, I said. Her gaze held mine. Commander Vreek thought he was replacing a position. He was replacing accumulated knowledge. I hope you return, not for his sake, but for the station's. Many depend on your work without ever knowing your name. Then she disconnected, leaving me alone with the quiet hum of our quarters and the uncomfortable truth that she was right. Margaret found me still sitting there. Later, "The council meets tomorrow," she said gently. "What are you going to do?" I thought of Vreek's confident clicking, the word ceremonial, the smug certainty that systems run on autopilot. I also thought of Tomb's distress, of the crew's combing seed from vents, of Malisk's humility. "I'm going to ask for something," I said. The meeting took place in the same office where Vreek had dismissed me. This time the holo display wasn't red with termination. It was crowded with incident reports, contract violations, and angry messages stamped with official seals. Vreek stood with both antennae pressed low stress, submission, whatever his people called it. Tesla watched from her corner, silently recording. "Good. Let there be documentation, Mr. Pritchard." Vreek began. "I wish to express, I have conditions," I said. His mandibles stuttered. "Conditions 3. I held. Upper hand. Meet them, and I return. We all pretend the last week was a lesson the station survived." He didn't interrupt again. "First," I said, "my salary increases by 20%. Locked for 5 years regardless of any budget initiative. The station has just learned what I cost when I'm absent." His tendrils twitched. "That is substantial. So, is the damage you've done?" I continued. "Second, any future personnel decision involving cargo coordination requires approval from Fleet Command's Logistics Division. I don't report to you alone anymore. That is highly irregular," he said, but his antenna didn't rise. So was firing essential stuff without understanding the role. "And the third condition?" he asked. Voice tight. "You apologize," I said. "Not privately, publicly, in writing. To the department heads who warned you. To Dr. Kellerman for risking his contracts. To trainee Malisk for placing her in an impossible position. On official station channels." Silence stretched until I could hear Tesla's processors faintly whirring. "That would humiliate me," Vreek said at last. "Yes," I replied. "It should." He stared at the incident list hovering beside him, proof that his theories had collided with reality and lost. Then, unexpectedly, he made a sound that the translator struggled with, a burst of clicking whistles. That turned into a strained laugh. "When I arrived," he said slowly, "I was informed humans are easy to manage, agreeable, desperate for stability, willing to accept poor treatment. Whoever told you that," I said, "hasn't been watching closely." His antenna lifted a fraction. Apparently not. He turned to the terminal and began composing. "Your conditions are accepted. All 3. The apology will be distributed within the hour." I rose. "Mr. Pritchard," he added, and I paused at the door. "For what it is worth, I understand now. I believed experience could be quantified, reduced, replaced. I was wrong. I didn't give him comfort. I gave him truth. Don't make the station learn that lesson again." When I returned to our quarters, Margaret was waiting with worry. on her face until I told her. Then her expression changed into the widest smile I'd seen in years. 20%, she repeated, like she needed to hear it twice. 5 years. Fleet oversight. Public apology. He agreed, I said. She wrapped me up in her arms. And for a moment the whole station felt less like a machine and more like a place. We actually belonged. The apology went out. It was thorough. It was painful. It was effective. 3 months later, I received a message from Malisk. She'd enrolled in a practical internship on a smaller station, learning from coordinators who'd earned their skill through mistakes and sleepless nights. Rather than perfect simulations, she wrote that she'd learned more in 8 weeks of actual work than in years of classroom theory. I forwarded it to Margaret over dinner, and she shook her head, smiling. Sounds like she's growing up, she said. Aren't we all? I replied. 6 months after my reinstatement, Commodore Whitworth visited for an inspection tour. We ate at a restaurant run by a Belarusian chef, who had somehow made human food taste like something other than nutrition. You look better, Helena said, raising her glass. I feel better, I admitted. The reports are stellar. So what changed? I considered it, then answered honestly. I stopped assuming my value was obvious. I stopped waiting for someone else to name it. I made it visible, formal, protected. Helena nodded slowly, approving. You should teach that. Fleet has a development program for logistics officers who've never had to clean up a real-world disaster. They need someone who's lived it. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a platform, she said. Keep Havayana running and help the next generation understand what happens when institutions mistake experience for a cost center. Later, on the shuttle back to my quarters, I walked the same corridor I'd walked with Tesla months earlier back when I carried a cardboard box and felt like my future had been erased in an afternoon. Same lighting, same signs, same quiet. Station hum. But I wasn't the same person. I'd spent years believing competence was its own protection, that if you did the work well enough, recognition would follow. The universe doesn't work like that. Infrastructure is invisible when it succeeds. It only becomes visible when it breaks. And expertise, real expertise, built over years of attention and consequence, doesn't announce itself. It has to be defended. Havayana's docks continued their constant choreography beyond the viewport. Freighters docking, pods sliding along rails, drones weaving through corridors like blood cells in an artery. Hundreds of thousands of lives depended on all of it functioning smoothly, not because systems magically ran themselves, not because algorithms were wise, because someone showed up and cared enough to notice what others missed. For a long time, that someone had been tolerated. Now, finally, that someone was valued. Not because a commander decided it, not because Fleet forced it, not even because the station panicked when I stepped back and let it wobble. Because I decided I was worth fighting for and accepted nothing less.